Everyone say Hannah. A man has two wives. That's the first problem of the story, but we're not going to go into that tonight. So interesting. 1 Samuel 1, look at verse 1 right here. We have, did I give that one? Whatever. I'm just going to tell you the story. 1 Samuel 1, a man by the name of Elkanah has two wives. Peninnah, who has children, Hannah, who does not have children. All right, that's what sets the stage, and you're going to see that these two storylines are going on. It says twice that the Lord closed her womb. It's kind of an interesting phrase. It said that the husband loved her, but God closed her womb, and then the other wife is seen as a rival, and she began to provoke her, but God had closed her womb. And it says this phrase in 1 Samuel, it says, so it was year by year. There's something about the process of time. There's something about the process that God does not think it a waste to bring forth a depth of a new prayer on the inside of you that shifts things in your life. And sometimes God uses months, sometimes years, and for the children of Israel in Exodus 2, it was centuries. Before God raised up a deliverer named Moses, it says that there came a groan from the children of Israel. And in 1 Samuel 1, it says, so it was year by year that they would go up, and the rival, Peninnah, began to provoke her, saying, look at my life and look at yours. I've got everything, and look at you. You can't bring anything for our husband. And see, I think for many years, Hannah just lived a nice Christian life. She put a Band-Aid over the gaping wound. She tried to enjoy the benefits of just being loved. But yet she was in a deep pain, and I believe for a season she had plastic smiles and hallelujahs. And she kept enjoying the hallelujah. It's all good. I'm loved. I'm good. I'm good. But yet there's a gaping pain, an elephant in the room. She's barren. And it says that the rival began to provoke her, and finally the dam began to break. I don't know, in about verse 7 or 8. And it says she did not eat. She began to weep and she began to cry out. And it says in verse 10 that she was in bitterness of soul, and she prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. And she began to cry out to the Lord, saying, finally, after all these years, the dam began to break on the inside of Hannah. She stopped running from the pain. She stopped hiding from it. And she let that wound cut her. And she will then begin to release one of the greatest prayers ever. And guess this is what it looked like. No words were coming out and no audible was coming out. Nothing audible was coming out of her. It was so loud it wasn't even heard. It was so loud it wasn't even heard. And she said this prayer, God, if you give me a male child, I will give him back to the Lord. And he will be a Nazarite in the house of the Lord. Do you understand what God did through that woman? Do you understand what God did through that woman? Through that woman's prayer, in one generation, the priesthood will be restored. In one generation, the prophetic office will be restored. And that prophet will anoint a king from Bethlehem who will usher in the Messianic kingdom. We always want to talk about David. I want to talk about Hannah. Everybody wants to talk about David, talk about Samuel. I want to talk about the spirit of prayer that comes on someone in the midst of a famine, in the midst of a drought, in the bigger vision where you're carrying a generational prayer. You're carrying a historical, generational prayer that's more than your individual breakthrough, but it's shifting a landscape for a whole nation in the earth. I don't know if you hear me, but we're going to get there. We're going to get there. She was carrying generation. She was carrying the ship. In her hour, that Eli and his sons, it was a corrupt priesthood. It was a compromised priesthood. And you find a woman that got so gripped with the spirit of prayer. Break the drought. Break the drought. And this is what she looked like. Her mouth was moving, but no words were coming out. And the saddest part of the whole story is the high priest thought she was drunk. It's so sad because it had been so long since the spiritual leadership had seen the spirit of prayer resting on someone. They termed it as fanaticism or drunkenness. And she goes, I'm not drunk with wine. I'm just gripped with a burden. I'm gripped with a burden that God's going to restore his word